Hello! This is a Forge scripting tutorial covering the spawning listener. What the spawning listener allows you to do is control the spawning in and out of Forge objects using scripting. And we'll begin with a simple example here of how you would set that up. So I've already placed down some objects here, but I've not set them up yet. So we'll go into the toggle here and we will get it to broadcast to channel 0. And then we'll provide some feedback for that on the console. And now the rocket launcher here is what we will give a spawning listener to. So we go into its scripting, and it is the spawn channel that sets up a spawning listener. And what you do is set this to whatever broadcast channel you want the spawning listener to listen to. So in this case we'll set it to 0. And the way this works is that whenever broadcast channel 0 is turned on, the listener will try and spawn in the object. And there's also the can despawn property here, but we will get into what that does in a minute. Now the other thing you need to do is you actually need to disable the normal spawning mechanics of the object because they interfere with the scripts, and that is the spawn time that's on an object as well as its place at start. And you should also be aware that you don't want to mess around with the min count either. So what we'll do here is we will set it so that it will never try to respawn of its own volition. And we will also set it not to try and spawn in at the beginning of the game. And this means now that the only thing that can spawn it is the scripting. Now unfortunately in Forge you can't test a spawning listener because in Forge items are always spawned into the map. So we will instead switch over to a custom game. And there we are. And now you can see here that the rocket launcher isn't yet on the map. But when we turn on broadcast channel 0, it spawns in. And with the way it's set up at the moment, if we turn that channel back off again, nothing happens. And also if we turn the channel back on here, nothing will happen because it's already spawned into the map. So now we'll head back to Forge and see what else we can do with this. Okay. So the other thing that's to do with the spawning listener is the can despawn property. And what we can do with this is if we set it to true, then what will happen is when the broadcast channel the spawning listener is listening to is turned off, it will actually despawn the item again, taking it off of the map. So that allows us to have items that are only spawned in while the channel is on. So we set that up, and another thing I'm going to do here is actually go to its max count property, and I'm going to raise this from 1 to 2. So this means now that there can be 2 rocket launchers on the map at the same time. And we'll now head back into a custom game. So we can now turn on the channel to bring it into the map, and we can now also take it off of the map when we turn the channel off. Now the thing to be aware of with the weapons, such as this rocket launcher here, is that if you turn off the channel while you have it equipped, it will still not disappear. It'll only disappear when you don't have it equipped, like so. So if we bring it back in again, and another thing we can do here is because we set the max count to 2, there can actually be 2 on the map. So when we go to turn the broadcast channel back on here, even though I already have a rocket launcher, it will spawn in another one because we raised the max count. So that pretty much covers the basics of setting up spawning listeners on objects, and what I want to show now is another aspect of the spawning system that can affect your scripts. And what I have here is a switch that when I turn it on, it's going to immediately spawn in a mongoose, and then after a 5-second delay, basically when this light stops flashing here, it's going to spawn in a building, like so. And if I turn this channel back off again, the mongoose is going to stay, but the building is going to despawn. And the reason I put this on a 5-second delay is so that I can show this particular spawning mechanic. So if I get too close to this, then what will happen is it'll actually prevent the object from spawning in when it normally should. And it's not until I go far enough away from the object that it will spawn that item into the map. And pretty much every Forge object will do this, except for the weapons, which will spawn in no matter how close you are to them. And what I want to show now is that it's not just players being too close to the object that can prevent it from spawning, but also having a vehicle too close will also prevent it from spawning into the map. So as you can see here, I'm quite a far way away from the building, so there's no reason it should not spawn in because of me, but it won't spawn in because of the mongoose. And now I drive the mongoose away, and it comes into the map. So that's another quirk of the spawning mechanics to be aware of when scripting in spawning. And there's one more thing I want to show here in regards to spawning, and that is that although every single Forge object has a spawn channel, and therefore you would think that you can control the spawning in and out of those objects, unfortunately that is not the case. And certainly everything here that is under the spawning category in the place object menu cannot actually be controlled via spawning. No matter what you do, these will always be spawned onto the map. And to show one quick example of that, I'm going to use a kill area boundary here, and I'm going to place a soft one. And then what I'll do is I will set this to the same broadcast channel I've been using for the rocket launcher, which we do know generally does work. I'm setting this up in the normal way. I'm setting its spawn time to never, place its start false, and its can despawn set to true, spawn channel set to 0. So for all intents and purposes, this item should not spawn in at the beginning of the game, and should only spawn in when we hit the switch. So here we are back in the game. As you can see, the rocket launcher isn't here, but the soft kill boundary is here on the map, and doesn't matter if I decide to actually turn this on now so that the item should spawn. Of course this is still spawned regardless, and even if I turn the channel back off again so it definitely should despawn, you'll see that when I walk back here the soft kill barrier is still there. And there's a number of Forge objects that do this, the main ones being all the ones under the spawning category. So that's something else to be aware of with the spawning. But that does pretty much now cover the spawning listener, and it also covers all the broadcasters and listeners that exist in the game at this moment. This does not mean that this is the end of the guide though, because I do have more advanced concepts to show that go beyond the basic scripts. One is the smart toggle, which is how a lot of these scripts that I've created work, is that they do something when I toggle them on, and they also do something when I toggle them off, and I've got a couple of different ways of creating those. And also being able to use on-destroy triggers as ways of turning things on, off, and also toggling. These are just a number of the things that I intend to cover in later videos. But for now, that does cover the basics of scripting.